as he tries to put another move on Nibali, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. We have climbs each of the next 2 days. Tomorrow will be more difficult. Today, relatively flat at the start. You see the climbs later on in the stage, but not as significant as the profile might lead you to believe.
That's right, Steve. It's one of the days that is a summit finish, but just some Category 3 climbs before the Category 2 up to the finish line. It's a 3.5-mile climb to the finish, not super steep. Don't expect this to be a big battle for the general classification, probably more for a breakaway today.
And we are now live here on stage 19, and Anchor Sorensen, the Dane for the Saxo Tinkoff team. He is over 20 minutes down, so no threats as you would expect in that group. The red line at the bottom of the screen showing that they are on the second of the 3 climbs, the Category 2 right now. And the peloton just a minute and a half behind, but everyone really flying today. It's been a very high pace from the outset.
Everybody wanting to make the breakaway because really today looks like it has a reasonable chance of a breakaway staying away. The problem for the breakaway is it took so long to get away, they never actually got much of a time gap established. And as you can see, it's not looking so good for the breakaway right now.
Yeah, we just saw a moment ago that the gap was a minute and a half, but that's a lot less than 90 seconds with the Astana-led main field coming up from behind. Vincenzo Nibali in the red jersey. He's got 5 teammates in front of him, 1 behind, and then behind him is Chris Horner in the white jersey. He's leading the combined classification here right now at the Vuelta and sitting second in the general classification, the only man within a minute of Nibali. Well, we start this final week at the season's final Grand Tour, really a 2-man race between Nibali and Horner. So you have to look at the upcoming stages and think, all right, where might the battle really be fought? Where can Horner take back time on Nibali? Where will the tactical games really play out in the remaining stages in this final week?
And Steve, you have to look at the penultimate day on the Angleroo, which is a massive mountain and super steep, over 20%. That's a natural place. And then the Peña Cabarga as well, stage number 18, is another very steep climb to the finish line, but it's fairly short. Outside of that, you just look at things that could crop up, crosswinds, interesting tactical battles. And when I talked with Chris after the race last night, actually it was almost midnight that he actually was just finishing up dinner, and we chatted a little bit, and he said, you know, Nibali's legs are every bit as good as his, and he either needs Nibali to have a bad day or he needs to catch Nibali in a crosswind or something like that where the field splits in half. But he said he could also fall victim to either one of those 2 things. So these guys are very evenly matched at the top.
Well, it looks like we have a few different groups here out on the road, judging by the pictures we're now seeing from above. We have the peloton at the bottom picking up a group of riders just in front, and then that other group that is actually up ahead on the road. So it's not just a 9-man breakaway and then the main field. Judging by these live pictures, it looks like a couple of different groups are ahead of the peloton right now with just under 50 kilometers left to go on the stage.
Yeah, so a lot happening all of a sudden. You see 2 more guys right now going across from the Astana-led peloton to the group right in front. And in moments like this, it's relatively easy for Vincenzo Nibali and his Astana teammates to watch guys as they go across. This is Barguil, the stage winner from a couple of days ago, I do believe, from a breakaway, the very young 21-year-old on the Argos team. But they can keep a really close eye as guys trickle off the front in a situation like this. So they know who's up the road, and they know if they have to worry about it or not. Barguil also has Cardoso with them, the Cajo Rual rider, and they have now bridged across to that group.
And Barguil, one of 8 first-time Grand Tour stage winners in this year's Vuelta. Which may sound like a lot, but it's really not a surprise because every year the Vuelta is an opportunity for some younger riders and riders who don't always get a shot in a Grand Tour to make their mark. And now we are back up with our leaders. Number 198 there in the dark with the blue trim. That is Rigoberto Urán, the Colombian for Team Sky. And Chris Anker Sorensen for Saxo Tinkoff in the blue, yellow, and black, riding in the middle of that group. As I mentioned before, the highest placed rider among the leaders in the general classification, but still over 20 minutes down. And going over the top of the Category 2 climb.
So a lot of possibilities here today. Urán, a very good man in the mountains. You have to think that he may have a shot at a stage win if that breakaway group can stay away from the field.
The actual summit at 46.8 kilometers remaining in the stage, and then they'll drop down, hit an intermediate sprint just over 30K from the finish, and then that final climb, the Formigal, is just over 15 kilometers in length going up to the summit finish of the stage. So just about the last 16K or so will be uphill here today. And a 44-second gap over the top of the second of the 3 climbs.
And the peloton right behind that other group, just over a dozen seconds or so separating them. So that second group struggling to get a little bit of an advantage over the peloton, and we'll see how the descent treats them. But the other guys have a little bit of an advantage, but you know, if it's under a minute at this point, it's going to be tough.
And these are the numbers that articulate the gaps and what the riders are facing. So no big time margins right now with 1 climb left to go. They've done the Category 3, the Cat 2, and now just the Cat 1 left to go at the finish. Still everyone just going over the top of the Category 2. Now 1 climb left to go. Just about 16 kilometers in length. The Category 1 at the finish here on stage number 16. Second rest day coming up tomorrow, and then perhaps a rare sprinter stage on Wednesday. More climbing going towards the end of this final week, and then of course the traditional final stage in the Spanish capital of Madrid that will no doubt end in a sprint next Sunday. Our leaders just over 40 kilometers now from the finish. And a lot of riders, given the hard riding, the series of mountains, the tough weather, have already pulled out of this race. Almost 50. We have 4 teams that have lost 5 riders apiece. That is over half the riders on a given team, because everybody starts with 9 when a Grand Tour begins. And it's basically the equivalent of 5 teams altogether. 48 riders at the start of the day had pulled out. So you're looking at basically 5 teams worth of riders abandoning this race with still a week left to go. That's an illustration, and a perfect one, of just how hard this race has been.
And Steve, it's not just been all the mountains, but certainly that's been a big component of it. But it's also been some of the nasty weather they had over the weekend, especially on Saturday's stage number 14. That particular day was brutally cold. It was really long, and they were also descending in those cold temperatures in the rain, and it just freezes you on the bike. Barguil here really putting the pressure on that chasing group that's trying to make it up to the lead group of 9. He's already tasted victory in this Vuelta, and I think it was pretty sweet for him. He wants a little bit more.
As I pointed out, one of 8 first-time Grand Tour stage winners that we have had at the Vuelta so far this year. Now, when you see riders pull out of a race like this, it's always interesting, because when you look at other sports, athletes don't always have those options. If a football player wants to quit a game in the second quarter, his coach is going to say, no, you get back in there and you play. Same with basketball, hockey, baseball. But in cycling, it seems like the athletes themselves have more control and more power over the situation. Why is that?
It's just That's a tough one to answer why that is, but I guess it's really because the rider knows about how bad their body feels and how much they're suffering. And I think with a coach in a typical team sport, they can see the guy out there and they can see that he's floundering. They can see that he's not making his passes, he's not hitting his shots, he's not making it happen. But in a bike race, if you're just empty, you're empty. Now, there are some exceptions to those particular moments, and there used to be a race before the wall came down in the Eastern Bloc. It went through East Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia, called the Peace Race, and it's come back, but it's not as big a race on the calendar anymore. And a couple years before I raced that race, Steve, one of the Russian guys was in the gutter in a crosswind and ran into one of these guardrails and broke, it was his foot or his lower leg or something. His coaches, because they weren't sure, put him back on his bike and said, you're only 10K from the finish line. You got to finish because we need you tomorrow, and we want to make sure before we let you quit today that you're not able to. So he rode 6 miles basically with a broken bone in his lower leg. And
what a shock the Russians would take a hardline stance like that.
Well, and the thing is, Steve, that was the race before the wall came down. Those guys weren't racing in the rest of Europe, so that was their Tour de France, and it meant everything to that Russian coach, and the rider had to suffer through it. And they said, oh yeah, look at that, you got a broken leg, I guess you don't have to ride tomorrow.
Under 40 kilometers now left to go on stage 16 today. And if you have questions for Gogo, you can tweet them here throughout the Vuelta telecast. And the most recent one coming in wants to know, Paul that is, how long do most professionals try to keep in the big ring when climbing?
Well, Powell, that's pretty easy. Just long enough to stay with Steve Schlanger, and he's putting the hammer down on one of those big climbs.
And I'm just drilling it, you mean? Yeah.
When you're putting everybody in the hurt locker. But in all reality, what I think is the most efficient for most guys at the professional level that have a lot of efficiency and higher leg speeds is to be in the easiest gear you can be in while maintaining contact with the guys that matter. So when I was racing, and still when I go out and ride with a lot of guys, if I'm on a big mountain, I want to be spinning up the climb. And if Schlanger's up there on the front just drilling it, well, if I can be spinning an easier gear, I'll get out of my big chain ring. But if I need to stay in that bigger gear to stay with him, then I will. And that tends to be my approach to climbs, and that's what I tell young riders when they're getting into the sport of bike racing.
Because you know I'm in the big ring going over Alpe d'Huez, Mont Ventoux. I am not backing down.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way you roll, Schlanger.
All right, so for more Twitter questions, you can do it at BGGogo, hashtag La Vuelta in this final week of the Vuelta Espana. Everyone on the descent of the Category 2 climb headed towards the final climb. This was just moments ago. Watch out along the guardrail.
Well, Gregory Ross looking back for his team car, but up in front, the Lampre rider stopping on the side of the road, and pow! Luckily, it was a low-speed crash, but Ross was critical 2 days ago in the wet when Chris Horner actually got split off on a descent, and Ross went to the front for like 5 miles and just closed down the gap for Chris. And Chris was really very happy about that. He was telling me that last night as well.
Riders coming through the town of Gavin with just about 36 kilometers left to go. They are 4K away from the second of the 2 intermediate sprints on today's stage.
Well, this is the 2 front groups coming together. The man right at the back of the group in front of the motorcycle up there is Warren Barguil, who went across from the second group. He was absolutely bombing this descent, and the other 3 men here getting across as well.
A lot of these riders know that the general classification teams are more than likely going to let them go. There's not going to be a big battle behind them for the stage win, given everything that's happened. So they're all sensing an opportunity to win a stage.
You ever wonder how you get these great images? Well, it's the man on the back of the motorcycle standing up with the camera. They do that on the descents as well sometimes, but sometimes they're going so fast downhill they have to sit down for the center of gravity on the motorcycle.
Can't imagine there's a more difficult sport to cover for television than professional cycling at this level.
It is quite tricky, there's no doubt. There's so much going on out there on the roads, and all the organization that it takes to close down these towns and keep people and cars and people with their dogs and everybody out of the way. And sometimes it doesn't go right. Sometimes somebody's dog does get off the leash or out of their yard and into the bunch, and it can cause big crashes.
Now riders still off the front, in pursuit, giving chase. A lot of activity off the front of the peloton with the two groups, and especially the breakaway of 9 riders that's been at the front. But everybody wants to make it to the front, catch the riders who are at the very head of the stage right now, and put themselves in position to go for a stage win as these riders hit that intermediate sprint point I just mentioned a moment ago.
Steve, there are a lot of possibilities. Gusev, the Katusha rider, Sorensen, and the other Sorensen on the Saxo team. That's Nicky Sorensen going across. Today is one of those days where a lot of guys really thought there was a chance if they made the break that they would stay away, because the finishing climb, though it's long, is not super steep, and maybe the general classification guys will just be eyeing each other and not ramp it up fast enough to catch the breakaway.
Well, it's a very interesting dynamic right now because you have a lot of riders here in this move that is up the road. They just don't have a lot of time. And when you have a long climb at the finish, you're going to have that natural process of attrition that's going to bring a lot of these riders back and carry a lot of the general classification riders forward. So it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. Are some of these riders going to launch an attack and maybe 3 or 4 go up the road together? There's just a lot of possibilities now for the way the remainder of the stage could unfold.
Yeah, and that group looks like it's about 20 guys at this point. So it is definitely one of those days where you roll the dice and just see how it plays out at the end of the day.
Back here at the front of the general classification group, going through the intermediate sprint, 122 down, led by Astana.
So the lead group has picked up a little bit of time. They were down to only 37 seconds advantage over the peloton not long ago. If that keeps up for very long, if Astana is comfortable, the team in the blue, the team of the overall leader, Vincenzo Nibali, if they are happy with that break, it may succeed.
Riders scattered about right now in that peloton as they look up the long road ahead to see another big group now at the front of the stage. Margin now swelling to our leaders, going up close to 3 minutes with 26.5 kilometers remaining.
Amassed around him, and then it's all the Astana guys on the front. They are certainly content to let that breakaway go today. Thinking about how Astana has all the riders still in this race, and of course Vincenzo Nibali is leading the overall race for Astana. Nibali was part of the Liquigas Cannondale team that had that incredible streak of so many Grand Tours in a row where they wouldn't lose a single rider. Every single guy was finishing every single Grand Tour. Yeah, it was pretty incredible as we see so much attrition in these Grand Tours. And it makes sense. I mean, you got 3 weeks of racing over 23 calendar days. So there's always 2 rest days thrown in there. But guys, inevitably, they end up sick, they crash out, or they just get so depleted they can't go any further and they have to drop out of the race. And so it's not unheard of to see almost every team finish some riders down in every Grand Tour.
So Astana with most of their riders at the front of the field right now with 25.5 kilometers left to go. So just inside of 10K away from the start of the final climb. About him already winning stage 13 from a breakaway previously. And each of the last 2 days we have had a first-time Grand Tour stage winner who was out front by himself for a long time, gaining a lot of time over anybody chasing from behind. Rato 2 days ago, Genier yesterday, had several minutes on everybody else, and coming from a breakaway but riding solo for the last hour or so of the race. But today a big group, and look like we're going to get that solo rider getting that substantial amount of time here today, the way we saw over the weekend.
This one certainly could come down to seconds at the finish line. And that group was kind of splitting up. It's kind of coming back together. Some guys along for the ride, just sitting on the back, playing the tactical game that way, thinking if they can save some energy now, then they'll be good later on. But there could be a split in front of them in the group, and then they may miss that split as one of the BMC men, it looks like, heading out of the front of that breakaway group.
Fabian Cancellara, number 181 at the back of the peloton. Been one of the top support riders for Chris Horner in the hills, and also won the time trial on stage 11 in dominating fashion.
Got to look for Cancellara at the Worlds as well to be a hugely marked man. I think in the road race, he's going to be so marked it may ruin his chances, but he may be on some of the best road form of his career right now.
Euskaltel at the front of the field. Sammy Sanchez is their highest placed general classification rider. Yesterday moving up into the top 10. Currently sitting 9th at 7:46 behind Nibali. Sanchez looks like second wheel there from the front, so perhaps just trying to protect his spot, maybe even move up further in the general classification.
And they're one of those teams that has all 9 members remaining. The other one is Astana. And interestingly, they're the top 2 teams in the team general classification, which is the first 3 guys that cross your line, the finish line every day. Astana leads that by 3:53 over Euskaltel. I still, it's a little curious to me to see all the Euskaltel guys on the front right now. They're not going to bring back the breakaway. And I'm wondering if there's a Team GC play-in. Maybe Movistar has a bunch of guys in this break, and they're the 3rd place team on Team GC, and maybe that's what they're riding for right now, is to try and keep that gap small.
Yeah, you never know. There's so many possibilities. It could be the Team GC. It could be just for Sanchez. It could be other guys just trying to move around in the general classification or race for a separate competition. You always look at points and King of the Mountains, the combination jersey. There's so many other subcategories beyond the overall general classification that teams have their eyes on, and on any given day they could be riding for that as opposed to just the overall. Well, our leaders with a margin of just over 3 minutes and just about to start that last climb. Officially, it begins at 15.8 kilometers remaining on the stage.
Well, it was good.
So if you do want to attack, that is a likely point late in the climb. With 15 kilometers left to go now, Barguil pulls off the front. This is a run for Team Sky now at the head of affairs.
Chiruka there for Caja Rural. And that is
Jose Herrera there from Movistar as well.
So there is at least one Movistar man up the road. No Euskaltel men up the road right now. Thinking about that Team GC issue potentially.
Now we have a rider accelerating here. He's going to go to the front and stretch things out a little for the group.
Yeah, trying to make it up there. Dominique Nares in this front group is the BMC man in the red and black.
Looks like there's a good chance of this group coming back together the way things are developing here.
So that's Arata in the blue for Movistar, Barguil in the white for Argos. And we do have a Euskaltel rider up there as well. So now it makes absolutely no sense to me why the Euskaltel men are on the front of the peloton.
Could it still be the general classification?
I guess it's got to be.
In some fashion for Sammy Sanchez?
Yeah, they just got to be thinking maybe he can pop off late in the race today and pick up a handful of seconds and have an impact on the general classification. You talked about Sanchez coming in 7:46 down in 9th place. but it's Leopold Koenig in 8th at 6:18. That's almost a minute and a half in front of him in the GC. But, you know, you pick up a little time here, a little there, and maybe by the end of this week, he moves up into the top 5. Maybe that's what he's got his designs on.
And Vuelta is still thinking about the team classification. Probably not a bad goal for them since they are disbanding in their current form at the end of the year. They have the Formula One driver Fernando Alonso coming in to take over the team, and yet to be seen how he'll change things or what they'll be referred to as going forward. But Vuelta, the way we have known them over the years, is now going to be altered in somewhat. So maybe this would be a good way to go out in their final grand tour to win the team competition. As you see the critical numbers here on the final climb. So no one really getting away from the big group at the front. We've seen some accelerations, but nothing that's looked close to becoming permanent. 2K into the climb, back at the front of the field. Vuelta in the orange and black still leading the way. We are just under 14 kilometers left to go on stage 16 of the Vuelta Espana, presented by Earbuds here on Universal Sports. A big leading group has just under 3 minutes on the main field on one of the shorter stages in this year's race. This is the final of 3 consecutive stages in the Pyrenees in northern Spain. Steve Schlanger with Todd Gugulski. Gorgeous day, sunny and warm after cold and rainy weather this weekend. Forced a lot of riders to drop out. Maybe rethinking things now, judging by the scenery they are enjoying today on stage 16, just ahead of the race's second rest day coming up tomorrow. We had a few different groups on the road earlier in the race as the breakaway tried to get settled. Took a long time today, and finally 2 groups came together, formed a large group at the front. And now this is the head of the peloton, led by Vuelta in the orange and black, just going inside the 15K to go banner on the stage.
Up here in that large breakaway group, it's Juan Manuel Garate, the Spaniard on the Belkin squad, who's trying to mix things up a little bit. The Frenchman in the white who just swung off of the chase, Warren Barguil, who won stage 13 from a breakaway earlier in this race. But you can see how many guys are back there trying to claw their way back up to the wheel of the few men in front of them.
The Belkin team is one of the 4 that I mentioned earlier that has lost 5 riders throughout this race. They lost Theo Boss, Graham Brown, Steph Clement, Luis Leon Sanchez, and Laurent Tandam along the way. So they've lost over half the riders they started with. So trying to salvage something in Juan Manuel Garate now at the front of the stage with just about a dozen kilometers left to go uphill to the finish.
And Steve, of course, this large group of riders has nobody who's a threat in the general classification battle of this Vuelta. So they are content to fight it out for the stage win, as Mikel Charel, the 3rd man up here, and he is number 15 on the left, just getting back on the wheel of Garate. This breakaway group, with no threat from the GC, has a very good chance of succeeding for the stage win.
Barguil, Charel, and Garate. Garate at the front in the green and dark colors for Belkin. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't Juan Manuel Garate the rider who on Saturday during the cold and rain got into the team car and warmed up for a little while before continuing in the race?
I actually think it was him, as he just put the heater on full blast and said, look, I have 2 options. I can lose 10 minutes sitting in the car, or I can quit the race. Well, let me think about that for about 10 minutes. Okay, I guess I'll get back on my bike.
Considering the way he's riding today, maybe that little lunch break in the team car to warm up was a smart move. Inside of 11K now to the finish of stage 16.
That's what's so critical about these bike racers, is that they never give up, because Yeah, there are only a few guys in the hunt for the general classification, but anybody could pick up a stage win from a breakaway on a day like today. And so if you feel horrible one day, you just can't drop out, and you may still get another chance.
And not as shocking as you may think, because considering what Belkin had been through, again, losing 5 riders already, so they weren't going to do much in the race. There was nobody left for the general classification, nobody left for the sprints. So maybe just winning a stage in the final week was the only goal they had left. So Garate says, hey, I can lose time in the general classification, no big deal. I'll take care of my body now and be fresh later.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the name of the game. You got to get whatever you can get out of these races, and you just fight to the next day, and you say, let's see if I can get in the break, and the entire team gets taxed, or I should say tasked, with making the breakaway, and they all follow the attacks, and they all go on the attack, and eventually one of those moves sticks, and if you got your guy in there, well, that's the first part of your job accomplished.
10 kilometers left to go. Euskaltel at the front of the main field. They have it lined up and are forcing the pace.
Yeah, you can see Chris Horner. Well, we just lost him there, but he's about 9-10 guys back, and he's just right behind that strung out single file pace being led by Euskaltel.
This is back to the large leading group at the front.
So the youthful exuberance of Warren Barguil after winning a stage from a breakaway back a few days ago, stage number 13. I wonder if he's going to do too much work in that breakaway group. He looks like he has great legs, but he may blow himself up in the process of trying to get away from everybody else and thin it down.
And the rider from Cofidis coming back from the breakaway. Well, the way that Euskaltel has been riding now for the last several kilometers, at first it looked like maybe it was for the team competition or maybe just a GC placing for somebody like Sammy Sanchez. But the way they've been riding, you almost have to think that they're trying to bring everything back so they can get a stage win.
It does seem that way to me, as they're going huge right now. So 2:39 at the 11K to go banner. So that's just under 7 miles from the finish of the bike race.
It's still a big group to try and bring back here.
Well, the youthful exuberance continues, and this time with nobody on his wheel, this is what he needs. Sitting on the front, pulling the other guys that don't want to work with him is probably not going to net him a stage win. But this type of a move, this guy can go uphill.
Barguil making his move right here. Turned around, said, you know what? This is not a good deal. All you guys sitting on my wheel, so I'll see you later. Catch me if you can.
Yeah, and if they look around at each other in that giant group and everybody says, no, I'm not going to chase, you chase. No, I'm not going to chase, you chase. Well, the man who won the Tour de l'Avenir last year, he also won the mountains and the points classification, and that's the race for the young guys, also known as the race of the future. He could pick up his second stage win in this year's Vuelta at only 21 years of age.
Now, among that large leading group, he was riding at the front longer than anybody else. It wasn't one of those big groups we typically see where everybody takes even pulls at the front. They all work in concert with one another. Barguil was left to do so much of that pacemaking, so this is a smart move to take off and see what he can do on his own. All right, so they went through that flat and downhill section early in the climb, now starting to go steadily uphill.
What's incredible about this guy is he's a first-year professional, Steve. To get the win in stage 13, he was ecstatic. He was overcome with joy. Now he's got that confidence from that, and he's gone on the attack again from that breakaway group. And now he can start to try and think about it and think, I've already done this once. Can I do this again? He will be absolutely beside himself if he can win a second stage.
And now Astana has put a man back on the front ahead of Euskaltel. They are 2:46 behind Barguil at this point. Climb, but back here in the general classification with the rest day on tap tomorrow, does it make it worthwhile to even try something today, or do you just save it for the big climbs coming up later this week?
Well, have a look at the speed of the peloton, and it is actually on right now in the peloton. The peloton is blowing apart, so definitely, if you have a shot, go for it. Nibali sitting third wheel in the red jersey, overall leader. Valverde fourth wheel in the green as the points leader. Right behind Valverde in the white jersey, Chris Horner out of the saddle right now. They all have to keep looking at each other, because if you get an opportunity, man, you have to take it.
Saw Katusha at the front of this group too. Their goal now is to try to move Joaquim Rodriguez onto the podium. He's fourth in the overall standings at 257 behind Nibali, but he's chasing Alejandro Valverde, who is third on the GC at 142 back.
Oh, this is white hot. I mean, these guys are absolutely storming, and it looks like Moreno now just pulling
Here goes
off the
Valverde.
front. Here he goes.
Alejandro Valverde launching the move. Nibali looks at Horner.
Horner needs to just sit on Nibali. Horner has to not do any work here. He has to make Nibali do the work, put him into trouble.
Horner has a teammate in Kieselowski, and Nibali also has a teammate for Astana there as well, as Valverde gets a small gap.
He's 1 minute 42 seconds down in third place, and it looks like he just sat up. I mean, that's it. He just pulled the plug.
Now, he may be trying to play a little defense for his podium spot right now. Again, sitting in third with Rodriguez behind him in fourth, and Katusha was setting a pretty good tempo ahead of him a moment ago.
And I think that Valverde, he looked back, he realized he wasn't getting much of an advantage. It's a headwind, and he said, maybe this isn't going to work. And he just pulled the plug on his own. I don't think his director would have told him to sit up at that point, because the director can't feel his legs, right?
And it's not like he's going to win the stage. They're not going to catch Barguil from this point.
Everybody has the rest day to look forward to tomorrow, so it's a good day to go for shots, and that looks like Nicholas Roach taking another shot just like yesterday.
Roach trying to move up into the top five, currently sixth on the general classification, 349 down, but he's just 6 seconds from a top five spot.
And they immediately neutralized him with Katusha, and it looks like Rodriguez on the second wheel. Now Rodriguez opens it up.
Pareto was attacking yesterday, didn't go anywhere. Now Chris Horner just ahead of Nibali, putting in a little bit of an acceleration, and he's got a small gap on Nibali.
Well, Rodriguez loves to accelerate in a very punchy fashion. Horner, a little separation, and there's no Nibali with Horner. Horner needs to just throttle it.
But he's looking around. He's looking around at 2K.
Now he's going. Now Horner's starting to pick it up, but it's Nibali closing it down in the red jersey.
Yeah, here comes Vincenzo Nibali now, working his way back to Chris Horner with Valverde on Nibali's wheel. As we swing back to the very front of the race, haven't seen this guy in the last several minutes.
Up, and Barguil just blew up, but Horner now continuing to keep it going here.
And he's still got the gap on Nibali. There's Aran. Rigoberto Aran passing Warren Barguil as they hit the 1K to go mark.
Aran could salvage something for the Sky team here. Aran with a lot more experience than Barguil in the professional ranks. Realize that Barguil is a first-year pro.
At a thoroughbred pace, it seems like, in the final half mile of the race. Side by side. And then behind them, Pareto Rodriguez with his teammate, Vladimir Gusev. So Rodriguez sitting right behind Gusev, and they have a gap on the other general classification riders led by Horner here. Where's Nibali?
Oh, this is huge right now as Horner has that gap. He needs 50 seconds to move back into the overall lead. Not much time to do it today, but he might be getting some of it.
So much for a nondescript day before a rest day. This is Nibali losing time to Horner, sitting behind Valverde.
And Thibaut Pinot there, and then it's Valverde, then it's now in the orange is Sammy Sanchez. Nibali in
There
trouble.
goes Valverde. Valverde launches a move.
You gotta go when you have the race leader in trouble.
It looks like Pareto Rodriguez here. Now it looks like the time bonuses will be eaten up ahead of these riders on the road. Chris Horner in the middle of the screen in the white, behind Rodriguez, who was at the bottom of the screen. This is the race leader, Vincenzo Nibali. He is losing time. These are our two leaders on the stage. Aran in the dark colors, Barguil in the white, coming up to the finish, waiting to see who's going to get the stage win between these two.
And Barguil refusing to pull. He says, nope, you're in the front.
Oh, look
and
at
here
this.
comes Nares right on the wheel with Husarski. Husarski's got a good finish as well. Don't count him out.
Iran looks over his shoulder just the way he did in the Olympic road race in London last year. It cost him a gold medal. Now he's trying to preserve a stage win here at the Vuelta. Looks like it could be a four-man race for the victory today with 200 meters to go.
And Iran starting to ramp it up, and here comes Husarski. Beware, gentlemen.
Iran not in the position he wants. Barguil right behind him. Then Husarski. Nares losing the gap. He can't hold on. Now Iran sprinting for the stage win. Just ahead of Barguil. Is he going to hold on? Barguil came up, and I think Barguil pulls off his second stage win just ahead of Iran.
Barguil at only 21 years of age, showing the poise of a seasoned veteran, not taking a pole and getting the win. But here is Horner right back here.
He is a little ways behind this man, Joaquim Rodriguez. Again, Joaquim Rodriguez looking to move up into the top three, currently fourth in the general classification.
This is a big battle, and look at Nibali, all kinds of guys up the road from the race leader.
That's Leopold Koenig coming up behind him. Now, other riders crossing over here, part of the early breakaway. Here's Perito Rodriguez.
And Rodriguez needs a bit of time to move up onto the podium. He's 257 down. Valverde is 142 down.
But he does have a gap on Valverde, who's behind him on the road. But this is the big story here. Vincenzo Nibali, the race leader, starting the day 50 seconds ahead of Chris Horner, who's in the white jersey here. But Horner has a big gap on Nibali. He's got Valverde right behind him, and then Thibaut Pinot in the blue.
So it is true that Valverde made it across from the Nibali group up to the Horner-led group. And now he's just sitting on the wheel, and he's probably going to jump Chris. But Chris needs to bury the throttle to get back as much time as he possibly can on Vincenzo Nibali.
All right, here's Nibali at 300 meters to go with Igor Anton in the orange and black for Euskaltel. Let's see where the Horner-Valverde group is. Here's Rodriguez coming across the finish line. There's Valverde, who pulled ahead of Pinot and Horner. Chris Horner crosses the line at 146 behind the stage winner. Now let's see where Nibali comes across. He's got 100 meters left to the line.
It's a nice little chunk that he picked up, no doubt.
Already 15 seconds that Horner has taken back. Over 20 seconds, Horner has pulled back on Nibali. 22 seconds officially. Horner takes back on the race leader Vincenzo Nibali with the summit finish on stage 16 at the Vuelta. We come back to our coverage of stage 16 at the Vuelta Espana. And here is the new general classification. Chris Horner now within half a minute of Vincenzo Nibali at the top of the standings. Also some movement behind them with Alejandro Valverde and Joaquim Rodriguez on the move there late in the stage. And Rodriguez actually picks up a few seconds on Valverde as they race for that final podium spot. Valverde, the first to accelerate from the group of GC riders on the last climb.
This really got things ramped up as Valverde sat up, but then he went again, and all the men started to crumble up the road. Also was Joaquim Rodriguez, who had attacked after Valverde went, and it was when Chris Horner went after him that gap really opened up.
So this is where Nibali for a moment looked like he was going to bring it back on Horner. But then Horner opened up a larger margin.
Horner just stayed out of the saddle and just kept drilling it as Rodriguez came across. Then Valverde, who had gotten up to the Chris Horner group and jumped him at the end. But the clock stopped there for Horner, and it was a long time before Nibali got to the finish line.
It would be 22 seconds overall between Horner and Nibali at the finish today, reducing his deficit from 50 seconds to 28. Well, here we go. The final 5 days of the season's final Grand Tour, and here is where we stand. Vincenzo Nibali is still the leader by now, just just under half a minute is his margin over the American Chris Horner at 28 seconds. So much developed a couple of days ago. For more, let's go to Go-Go Cycle Center, outfitted by Adrenaline. 9 kilometers to Burgos with 2 Category 3 climbs there in the second half of the race.
And it is about 117 miles today. There's that little bump inside the final 10K, but when you only have a 2-man break, it certainly looks like a day for the sprinters.
And that 2-man break is on the left-hand side of the screen, now full screen. As we pick up the live action with just under 80 kilometers left to go, they have a lead of 4 minutes, which is just under half of their largest margin, which was over 8 minutes earlier in the stage. The Aussie Adam Hansen is the rider right here for Lotto Belisol, and Javier Aramendia in the green and white just behind him is the Spaniard for the Caja Rural team. 2-man breakaway that the general classification riders were content to let go. They are well down in the general classification. Hansen here almost 2 hours back of our leader Vincenzo Nibali.
Very tough for 2 guys. Javier Aramendia, you're seeing 3 hours 16 minutes down on the general classification, but he's featured in multiple breaks. But on a day like this that everybody thinks the sprinters really want to take advantage of an opportunity, it's so hard if you only have a 2-man break for them to stay away. But it's always time to eat.
A little pizza pocket or something that he shoves in the mouth as we take you through what is at stake here in this stage number 17. You have the 2 Category 3 climbs, and you have the notion of a sprint stage versus a breakaway, potentially stealing the opportunity from the sprinters. Now, Lampre is the team riding at the front of the main field. They're the team in the pink and blue, also the team of sprinter Max Marchese, who has already proven himself to be one of the fastest sprinters in the field so far.
Yeah, a couple of second-place finishes in the race, and he continues to, well, let's just say hold out hopes. If you're a sprinter, you have to believe in your ability, and of course his team has to believe in that ability as well.
The most recent inquiry coming from Sandra, asking Go-Go if the ride into Madrid on the final day is like the tour into Paris on the Champs-Élysées. Is it just ceremony for the general classification? I could even answer that one.
Would you want to answer it?
I would say absolutely. It's the same thing.
I'm going to take a slightly different take, and you can see right now, I just want to point out this crosswind has made a little bit of a difference here over the top of that climb, but it's somewhat similar to the Tour, but I think they get down to racing a little bit earlier in the Vuelta than they do in the Tour, whereas the Tour is ceremonial for a greater part of the stage. But yes, it's a flat day, so the guys know that they can't make any general classification differences, but they have the next 3 days with summit finishes to get all the business done.
Well, something to consider in this year's Vuelta is the fact that the top 2, Nibali and Horner, are separated by under half a minute. So if that gap gets even closer, we may actually see some racing on the final day. It typically doesn't happen just because the time gaps are significant enough that guys just use it as that coronation type of a stage, and it's essentially a parade. But if the time gaps are small, you do see some racing.
Yeah, and there's no reason that you wouldn't. There are also 2 intermediate sprints on the final day, Steve, and they have a few seconds attached to each one of those. So if it's within an intermediate sprint or 2, then you're really going to see some action. But we're seeing some action here right now because of the crosswind. And this is what the general classification men needed to be worried about. You saw the green jersey of Valverde there, but you need to keep a close eye out and see if Horner and Nibali are also in that front split.
And to ask Go-Go a question throughout the Vuelta a España, just go to Twitter. It's @BeachyGoGo, #LaVuelta. So Lampre at the front, Orica Green Edge there, and then Movistar. These groups now that were split on the road by a few seconds, it looks like are coming back together. But this was the most dangerous aspect of this stage. The winds coming from various directions, headwind, crosswind, tailwind should be coming up later on, but something you always have to keep a watchful eye for And now on the left-hand side of the road, almost single file here at the back because of those wins. Looks like a sprinter stage on paper, but you have a couple of climbs, you have some undulations late, you have wind, you never know what might happen, and we've seen more than one textbook sprinter stage develop into something entirely different throughout this race.
And that was Samens, who just got brought back, who was off the front and was third over the last mountain, but we're still up to our 2 men off the front. So now that means the next climb of the day, the guy who's third across can get some points, and we may see another battle between Rato and Ade for that final point.
Barguil, the young Frenchman of the Argos team, who won stage number 17 in dramatic fashion, outsprinting Rigoberto Urán at the very end. He's won 2 stages in this Vuelta, his first 2 Grand Tour stage victories, and the young Frenchman, believe it or not, has as many wins as Spain does in their home.
Number 1, Vincenzo Nibali. He said yesterday he didn't see the mechanical problem for Chris Froome. Froome believes he did, and the images indicate that Froome might well be right. Not much conversation here between Froome and Quintana. There's been plenty after the stages. They've shown real class, both of them, in the way they've conducted themselves. But once they're on the bike, it's on. And today, Nairo Quintana has avowed it's all or nothing. He's also said for the Movistar team, they're hoping for Alejandro Valverde to hold on to 3rd place and join Nairo on the podium in Paris. And Vincenzo Nibali, he'll be out fighting for another stage victory as he sits down the back of the race having a chat to the 2 Carusos, actually. That is Gianpaolo Caruso from Katusha and Damiano Caruso from BMC. Number 118, Rigoberto Urán. Reports of him changing teams at the end of this season, and the Colombia team are hoping to bring him across to their team. The Colombian team actually first rode the Tour de France in 1983, and the first Colombian to win a stage of the Tour de France was the great Lucho Herrera a year later in 1984, and he won to the top of Alpe d'Huez. Just about ready to go. Christian Prudhomme giving final instructions to the team cars. We're underway for stage 20, kilometre 0, the first to attack. It's Alexander Geniez from FDJ, and he's joined by Tim Wellens of Lotto Soudal. It might take a while, though, for the break to get established. With the downhill start, it provides that little bit of extra motivation. Anticipate that the first 25 kilometres today will be covered in around about 30 minutes. Through the department of the Savoie, in the heart of the Alps, down the Valley Road for now at least. They had a pretty good ride yesterday, FDJ, with Thibaut Pinot finishing in 4th position on the stage, who enjoys the cooler temperatures, Thibaut Pinot. All of his performances throughout this year's Tour de France have indicated that. Strong when it's cold, struggles when it's hot. He was 4th on the stage yesterday. His teammate getting into the break early, in fact creating the break, as Nevadauskas from Canada-Garmin was trying to go across to him. The Australian and the British connection on the side of the road. And now the South African national champion. This is Jacques-Jans van Rensburg going forward. Good climber, Van Rensburg. In fact, early in his career, he was doing a fair bit of climbing with Chris Froome. Nevadauskas and Geniez, the 2 to take the initiative. Had a nice solo stage victory last year, Nevadauskas. That was on stage at 17. Checking across the shoulder, seeing what sort of reaction is coming. Generally a sign that the legs are sore as well. They've got every right to be. They've covered more than 3,000 kilometres in the last 3 weeks of racing. Of course they'd be tired. One man who was clearly tired yesterday, Geraint Thomas, who again provided us with a great quote. Taking from the quote, sometimes you're the hammer, sometimes you're the nail. Yesterday, Thomas said he was a cheap IKEA nail. Geschke, joined by Pipo Pizzato. And we haven't seen much of Pipo throughout this year's tour. We've seen a bit of his team, but not from the flamboyant Italian. Stage win for Lampre into Gap. That was with the experienced Spaniard at Ruben Platza. At 35 years of age, has opened up his account at the Tour de France. A new team for him this year, Ruben Platza, a new lease of life. Through the valley of the Maurienne. We haven't moved too far as the bird flies throughout the last few days, but the driving, the transfers have been horrendous because we've had a number of landslides, which has changed today's course, and it's not so simple as just going over the top of the mountains. You have to drive around quite a bit. Hopefully the transfers have been a lot easier for the riders who need the rest, a lot more than those of us covering the race, and that is stating the obvious. Gorka Izagirre is joined Pizzato and Geschke trying to go across. Izagirre in the dark blue colours of Movistar. Bushman's hanky being used by Navadauskas as he clears the nostrils. 20 seconds the advantage for these four leaders. Izagirre, Geschke, Pizzato trying to come across and make it 7. Ede, this is Lars back. Been a great tour for Lotto Soudal. 3 stage wins for them, courtesy of Andre Greipel. A 4th tomorrow, perhaps. He'll be the favourite. Normally it would be Mark Cavendish, but I suspect that tomorrow the favourite, the bookie's favourite, will be Andre Greipel. Looks like Thomas de Gent has come across to close this down. Contador. He said he was cramping throughout yesterday's stage, and in fact his ability to suffer through this year's Tour de France deserves as much merit as his previous successes at the Tour de France when he has won overall. 2007, 2009, Alberto Contador, the winner of the Tour de France. Number 103, Luke Durbridge from Orica Green Edge. He's been pretty quiet, Luke Durbridge. It's been a tough tour. It might have been a big ask to put him in this race after he rode so strongly at the Giro d'Italia. This is Jos van Emden in the colours of Lotto and El Jumbo. All the team buses now making their way from the start area through to the finish line at the top of Alpe d'Huez. Let's hope the gantry is at the right height for the Orica Green Edge bus. I'm sure they're sick of that gag. One of the defining moments it was, wasn't it, of the 2013 Tour de France, when the Orica Green Edge bus got caught underneath the gantry at the end of the opening stage in Corsica. Quickly prompted a couple of Twitter accounts in honour of the Orica Green Edge bus. They got a lot of coverage. They got even more coverage the following few days as Simon Gerrans won stage 3. The team then won the team time trial on stage 4, and Simon Gerrans moved into yellow before the jersey going across to his teammate and his roommate, the South African Daryl Impey. The courageous quartet off the fronts. Geniez, the man who started it all in white. Lars back, Nicola Ede, and Ramunas Navadauskas from Canadal Garmin. Weather conditions, for now at least, just about perfect. It's relatively mild, in the low 20s. And with the complications of, logistic complications of providing the race coverage from Alpe d'Huez, a part of the media compound is separated between Alpe d'Huez and down in Grenoble. Let's now head across to Paul Sherwin and Phil Liggett to take you through to the finish.
Thanks very much indeed, Matthew Keenan there, as we're looking again at the beauty of the Alps. I think the riders are fed up with this view right now, because after 4 days consecutive in these high mountains, there is some very tired bike riders down there, and we are intrigued and hoping we see a great race today. I don't see how it can possibly fail.
Well, it's got all the right recipe, Phil. You've got two massive climbs, outside categorized climbs. The Col de la Croix de Fer, finished by the fabled Alpe d'Huez, and a short stage too, just 110 kilometers long, around about 70 miles of racing. So it really is a recipe for a great day of racing. And for everybody who is in the top 10 positions in the overall standings, it's a last serious chance to shuffle their positions overall.
So all the team buses are scurrying down the autoroute on the left side of the race. They're heading for Alpe d'Huez in the shortest possible route, while these boys have got quite a long stage, but one of the short ones in the mountains, only 110.5 kilometers. These four riders just want to lead before they hit the first climb of the day, the Col de la Croix de Fer, a climb of 29 kilometers.
Well, there must be lots of questions, Phil, about yesterday. The fact that Chris Froome was seriously isolated a couple of times throughout the stage, and I'm sure that Alejandro Valverde of Movistar will have noted that. So too will Alberto Contador and his Tinkoff Saxo squad. But the big question mark to me, has Vincenzo Nibali recovered from the very difficult first 10 days he had of this year's Tour?
So as we continue, just to show you a little bit of the lovely scenery here around the Alps, the riders now heading on towards Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne. Lars back, the man just coming into our picture here, number 72. Nice little valley road, this, usually clogged with traffic, I have to say, at this time of the year. As the riders race along the valley, we've got all the famous climbs of the Alps around us at the moment. Even La Toussuire, where we finished yesterday, is not very far away.
Well, I'm sure many of the riders, Phil, will be quite happy to move away from this valley, because it's not one of the most picturesque valleys in France, because right down in the bottom there's a huge aluminium factory. In fact, there's a museum to the manufacture of aluminium in there, which started way back in the 19th century. But that's where the riders are headed to, over the top of these high, craggy peaks.
Yeah, there's a road in there somewhere, and we'll have to find it later as we go over the Croix de Fer, which we've been crisscrossing for the last 3 days. The way they came down yesterday, before they actually turned onto the climb to La Toussuire, is actually the way we go up today, and we go down the way we came up yesterday.
Funny old Tour de France this year. They had to change the race route because of a landslide and problems with a tunnel over on the other side by the Lac de Chambon, and that's why we're going right back over the Col de la Croix de Fer. From this side, it's actually slightly longer. It's a 29-kilometer ascent. It does get very, very difficult up towards the top, and very open and windy. Although we've now seemed to have got Team Sky to the front, they've calmed everybody down a fraction. But once we start to begin the climb in earnest, once they've gone through Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne and made the left-hand turn away from the valley, that's when I think we'll start to see some tempo coming on in the main field, because that's when they will start that. When they'll start that 29-kilometer climb, that's 18 miles of climbing that they will be facing up to at that point. As you can see down in the bottom there, the river, a little bit dirty at the moment as well. That's the River Arc, and the reason that it's looking quite so dirty and murky is there have been some unbelievably heavy mountain storms going through here over the last couple of days. In fact, 2 days ago we were trying to drive over the Col de Vars to make the shortcut across to Briançon, and the road was actually closed by a mudslide. We had to turn around and come backwards. It's been pretty dramatic down here in the Alps. Fortunately, not during the race, mainly during the night and the evenings when those big storms have come through, although there was a huge electric storm last night. But it seems to have cleared the air a fraction, and hopefully the rain will stay away from the Tour for this last beautiful day in the Alpine passes. So Alexander Geniez, Lars Bak, Roman Navadauskas and Nicolas Ede, well, they will be quite happy when they see their gap here creeping up. With almost every pedal stroke, it's starting to creep up to 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
And it really is the calm before the storm, and we hope that's the only storm we get, because last night again, after the race finished, there was a heavy delivery of rain, thunder, lightning. We thought the sky was on fire at one point. It was an amazing sight, but it's all gone away overnight, and it's forecast to be a lovely day for the Tour de France. And Paul, that could so quickly ruin this race if those storms came during the race time.
Well, I think the fortunate thing is, Phil, we've seen over the last 4 days in the mountains the storms have come in the latter part of the afternoon. So fingers crossed. We're finishing a little bit earlier this afternoon as well, close to 4:30 in the afternoon. Joaquim Rodriguez there, number 91. He was the former wearer of the polka dot jersey. He's now sitting in 3rd place. But it's going to be a very, very difficult competition to win, because I think the winner of the stage today could very well run out the winner of the King of the Mountains competition as well, because the points are doubled. It's an outside categorized climb. There are 50 points available for the first rider to get to the top of Alpe d'Huez in that competition.
We're no more a good move. They're not going to win the Tour de France today, no matter how far ahead they get, because they're too far behind. The peloton is concentrating on the battle in hand, but we know that Quintana will attack. His whole ambition is not to win the stage, but to try and win the Tour de France, and he may well attack, Paul, on the Croix de Fer.
I'm not sure that would be the ideal thing to do. Anyway, would it be a good time to remind the riders, Phil, that here they're going through the lowest point of today's course at 534 metres above sea level. From here, it's all uphill.
It's not far up behind the highest point in England, 500 metres, as we're watching the riders here. Cheers all the way. There it is. They're on to the lower slopes for the leaders. 29.1 kilometres to climb. And they've been in this area now for 3 days. They must know these roads pretty well. It's been a good tour to follow in the Alps for the spectator, actually, Paul.
Well, it certainly has. If you had a nice camping car, you could have parked it on the Col du Glandon. You could watch the race go by on 3 separate days, obviously in 3 different ways, but certainly the spectators, I think the Tour de France did an incredible job of actually managing to reroute the race with less than a month to go before it actually came into this region, because of the change in the road conditions. And I think it's made this stage a little bit harder than it would have been, because I just have the feeling that the Col de la Croix de Fer is more difficult from this side than the Col du Galibier would have been.
Yeah, it did make me miss the Col de Telegraph and the Col de Galibier, but we're going in a completely different direction now, and that's why we've got this valley road for the moment to move us across the Croix de Fer, and then from there we'll be going to Alpe d'Huez itself.
To pay the hotel bills like everybody else, but I think also, Phil, missing out on those 8 or 9 days of competition could give him the little extra kick when it comes down to this last mountain stage.
Well, this is it. We are about to get and see the big signboard that will tell the riders they're 29.1 kilometres from the top of the Col de Croix de Fer, the penultimate major mountain. There it is. So the peloton, Jens, are on the climb. Jens, tell me, what did you feel like when you saw those signs at the bottom of a mountain?
Well, you know, it's the second last climb of the whole Tour de France, so you're happy that tomorrow you're in Paris. But yes, this signs always means pain. Basically just pure pain for you for a long, long time. I must say I'm surprised that the peloton goes fairly easy and relaxed here. I would have expected more stress coming up from the peloton. I believe that's an absolute clear sign that this tour was just super hard. The riders are just really tired and happy that they have a little quiet moment where they can relax a little before the fireworks start.
Yeah, the funny thing is, Jens, just looking at Team Sky moving to the front, I think they're using the old adage of setting a false tempo on the front of the main field and maybe trying to put everybody to sleep and making the attacks come later in the day, which advantages Chris Froome.
Well, I guess this tactics works well for about 150 riders in this peloton. They are happy about the slow speed. There's maybe 10 guys, they are itching to go. They want to go on this climb. And let's see how long they can hold them back.
Interesting today, because it's a short stage of just 69 miles, 110 kilometres, there's no feeding station on the route. And did you notice that Team Sky had a premeditated plan there?
This is
food up. Now, what's happened here?
Well,
I think it's just a squashing to get through the gap.
Yeah, this is where the road just narrowing a fraction, everybody queuing up to get through the corner. And if you're a knife specialist, Phil, of course, I know you know that I love knives. This, of course, Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne is the home of the Opinel knife. And you can see just in the middle of the little silver thing at the top, that is the locking mechanism. It's quite a cheap knife as well. You could probably afford one at about 15 euros for the number 8, which is the most popular one.
Yes, but as big as that, how on earth are you going to carry it around? That's ridiculous. Well, there's no sun on this side of the mountain, as you can see, as we look at La Cime des Torches, up high up in the mountains. We won't get as high as this today, though.
No, we won't. Certainly, as you can start to see the craggy outcroppings, it really is a beautiful day in the Alps looking around here, and this is one of the reasons I think why the Tour de France is such a magical event. It shows us off some of the beautiful places we'd love to visit when we come to France on holiday.
So the rides themselves now, everybody, the 160 riders surviving to Paris tomorrow are all now on the first big climb of the day, the Col de Croix de Fer. And once over the top, they'll only have 56 kilometers to race. Rouvy just shot off the front of the bunch, taking advantage of the lull here as we fall back to the biggest gap of 8 minutes.
This is a very sensible, Phil, for the moment by Team Sky. They were watching the riders who were going away and making sure they weren't too dangerous, and they're keeping their pace nice and steady. Just a quick glimpse of Tyler Farah, the sprinter on MTN Quebecer from the United States. He's slipping away. He's going into survival mode, and all these riders are thinking just how much time they can lose on a day like this. And I've made a quick calculation between 29 and 30 minutes. It's not a lot.
These are tentatives now by riders who can't win the Tour de France in the space that's left, trying to get leads over the men they know will hit them hard later on, and try and get just a few gaps before we get up the climb. 8 minutes the gap, and we're only 48 miles from the finish. Ruben Platzer here, pushing on Paul. He's just made his move, but the tempo has been picked up by riders at the back there.
Yeah, but what's also interesting, you've got a rider from Astana getting across the gap, another rider from Tinkoff Saxo trying to get across the gap. They're all trying to lay the foundations for an attack that's going to come later on in the day, because they realize it's so important to have somebody forward. Now, it's Rafael Majka who came across there, number 45.
He's just attacked. He's decided he wants to be in this bait. Now, he could be the advanced Alberto Contador. This is Grifko, by the way, who's come up with Platzer.
And the other day, Vincenzo Nibali said an awful lot of thank yous to Andre Grifko for the work that he and the rest of the team had done to set up his victory on yesterday's stage. But you can see also getting into that move, Team Movistar. Now, just coming. Looks like Romain Sicard again. He was on the move yesterday, former world under-23 road racing champion, and still there is no reaction from Team Sky, and I don't expect there to be any reaction from Team Sky for the moment, because what they will do is they'll wait until they see any sort of a move come from probably only Nairo Quintana is the only rider really that Chris Froome needs to really concentrate on. This big old Arnaud Dumas there, number 24, the big sprinter from France. The sprinters now trying to find the gradient here, getting just a little bit heavy. The other rider slipping out there was Armindo Fonseca, the French rider with the Portuguese sounding name on the Bretagne Sèche Environnement squad. There's still a very, very long way to go up this climb. We've only done about 4 or 5 kilometers. Once they get to the Grand Tunnel at about 1,300 meters in altitude, then they've got a bit of a plateau for a while, maybe about 3 kilometers, and then they'll start to kick up once they get into Les Chambons, and then it's all up to the massive summit, the height of 2,067 meters over the top of the Col de la Croix de Fer. And it's a long descent on the other side. We're looking at around about 20 kilometers downhill into Allemont. Marcel Seeberg is the big German rider at the back, lead-out man for Andre Greipel. Greipel, Cavendish, all the sprinters today will be in survival mode, just hoping that they can limit their losses on this very, very violent stage. Now, the next acceleration, this is Stefan Kruijswijk. He's the rider from Lotto Jumbo. He's done an awful lot of work throughout this race. They're trying to prepare the end of the race for Robert Hessink, who is having a brilliant Tour de France, a 6th place overall. And they are one of only 2 teams left with a full complement of riders. This is Bob Jungels, the Luxembourg national champion, and still no response. All these guys feeling they've got a chance to move away from Team Sky until the big guns start to accelerate the tempo later on in the climb, because I think we will see a general acceleration as we get to around about 10 kilometers to go to the top of the climb. There's Nicolas Roche just touching his push to talk button on the radio, having a quick conference call with the team car behind. Well, although it's a 7:53, and I think this is a rather important note that Rafael Majka has seen this as an opportunity. He's a rider on the back there in the the lime green fluorescent camouflage type jersey of Tinkoff Saxo. Now, this is the little part of the course I was saying about. This is the first little descent after 6 kilometers. They drop down from Les Crêtes. It's about a kilometer downhill, and then they will go through the little village in the bottom and then start to tip up one more time. It's pretty interesting to note that Rafał Majka has got himself in there. The other rider who's managed to sneak into the group is Bartosz Łzaski, the Polish rider on Team Bora. It's nice to see a different rider getting into the breakaway for Bora Argon, because Jan Barta, the rider from the Czech Republic, he's been extremely aggressive and looked for breakaways since the very first stage, very first road stage, way back on the road up to Zeeland. Warren Barguil, he also realizes that this is a chance for him to get a bit of redemption, because having ridden so high in the overall standings, he crumbled a little bit yesterday. He's now filled 27 minutes down in the overall, and he's dropped down to 14th place. And again, Sky riding sensibly, not responding to these little early attacks. They know that they must prepare themselves for the attacks to come from the big guns in the last part of today's race.
Well, it's another Welshman at the moment. Geraint's teammate Luke Rowe, who's been a terrific bike rider on Team Sky in his first Tour de France, still strong 3 weeks down the road. Remember, it was 3 weeks ago when we started with the time trial on the first Saturday.
Cyril Gauthier going clear. Now again, it's the same guys we've seen over the last couple of days. These are the guys, Phil, who are coming out of the Tour de France in good form, and they've got fine legs in the last week of racing. We had talked last night in the car travelling down here. There's a lot of riders in this Tour de France who have ridden quite anonymously. We've never even mentioned their names. There are 198 riders started, and many of them have never even seen the front or the breakaway.
Away pretty quickly at the moment as we are gradually in the ascension on the climb, and once over the top there will only be 56 kilometers left to race, most of it downhill till we get into Bourg d'Oisans, and then the last 16 kilometers the climb of Alpe d'Huez. Now these are the riders who started the move. They might be aware they've got some strong riders trying to reach them now. As far as we can ascertain, Contador is tired from his moves yesterday, and the plan is to try and get Majka a stage win, and he's coming up in the next group of 7.
Well, he is a man who's got a real pedigree of being a great climber. Won 2 stages in the Tour de France last year, and you know what, Phil, if he was able to go over the Croix de Fer in first position and go over the top of the Alpe d'Huez in first position, he'd be very close to get himself a repeat win in the King of the Mountains competition.
This is Warren Barguil here. He promised a lot earlier on, but he had a few problems. Now he's going to try and do something about it today. And Majka is a strong man, as Paula said. Last year's King of the Mountains as well. But not really in the competition this year.
Well, if he was to win the top of the climb here today and win the stage, Phil, I think with the addition of points, there are 75 points available. If none of the other big names were to get into the top 3, Rafał Majka could go bingo on today's stage as Pierre Rolland makes a move now away from the group.
Pierre Rolland, remember, is riding for Team Europcar. That team ends at the end of the year. The team management said after the Tour, if they haven't got a new sponsor, they're free to negotiate with other teams.
Peter Weening, the rider from Orica Green Edge, a great climber from Holland, still no reaction from Sky. They don't need to react to these, Phil. It's almost a situation as if they're swatting flies with these small attacks. They've just got to concentrate on Quintana, Valverde, Nibali, and possibly Contador. Nobody else is really a threat when you come back to the addition of time.
Kruijswijk as well, another man who's having a great first Tour de France.
Well, I don't know about fashionable. I like their team kit and I like their style of riding. They are a band of brothers. They're doing great. What they're trying to do is they want to secure, like you guys said, they want to secure the point jersey, the mountains jersey, the polka dot jersey for Romain Bardet. And I think they're also concerned about Froome. It is very unlikely that Romain Bardet is going to outclimb Chris Froome on the last climb of today. So they need to try to get some big points on this climb on Col de la Croix-Fer, because they get next to no points on the last climb, and Froome will be forced to take big points in the end because he will have to chase Quintana.
Yeah, it's a very good point. The points available today on this climb, by the way, is 25 for the winner, down to 2 points for 10th place. Now, Bardet is only 3 points ahead of Chris Froome. And even if Froome isn't riding for the King of the Mountains, if he were to get the 50 at the finish line today for the win, that would make a big difference. Edvald Boasson-Hagen, the champion of Norway, rides for MTN Quebec. He's tired today, that's for sure, as he just hangs on to the back of the peloton. Continuing, Paul, but great news, the sun is out as the riders climb the Col de la Croix de Fer under the pressure. J.C. Perrault at the front. We saw him row and skin his left side, and he said, I'm staying in the race because I hope I can recover to help the team, and that's exactly what he's doing now.
We got a self, and they were after, and again Ruben Platzer seeing this as an opportunity, taking a leaf out of the tactical handbook. As soon as we're about to get caught, goes straight back over the top. But you see how attentive Raphael Majka is, and immediately getting across there, Warren Barguil looking for the move here, but I don't think they're going to allow them too much freedom, Phil, once we start to get into the next part of this climb.
Oh, well, that's taken a lot of effort out of riders who thought they might have got clear there and put them back in their place. We've had two riders sprint away off the front again. I think Mike is trying to get away. Kreiswick has gone once more.
Well, Micah, I think we could be right there in the fact that Tinkoff Saxo were quite happy to try and defend the position of Alberto Contador. Let him ride there in 5th place overall. He's no way that he can ride any better. He can't win the Tour de France this year after winning the Giro d'Italia. So give him a chance at trying to win a stage here this afternoon. And as I said, there's a very strong possibility. He's already got 40 points in the King of the Mountains competition so far. So if he's to go over the top of this climb first and he went on to win the Alpe d'Huez stage, he could be cracking on to win the competition as he did last year as the King of the Mountains.
Well, he's on a mission, that's for sure now. You're right, Contador will, I think, finish this race in 5th place overall. And he's always said he never races for places, but the win which he's tried to do, Barguil has come back. He's been picked up, 6:22 now the spread.
Well, I'm not surprised. Just look at the tempo here being dished out by J.C. Perrault. It really is a train d'enfer, as the French like to say, an infernal pace as he's at the front, and he's causing some serious damage at the back end of the main field because of this pace that he's setting. I think he wants to make sure he nullifies all of these breaks.
Trouble at the back here. This is Landanu, who's riding extremely well. Oh, sorry, it's Genius in the breakaway that's done pretty well. That's a shame, but I think they're under pressure anyway, and there's it's only a front wheel, but there is always a problem these days getting those wheels changed.
Yeah, well, the big problem is, Phil, in recent years, because of security and health and safety, they've actually put a special lump up onto the front wheel and the changes, which means that the mechanics have to screw up the quick release before they can lock it into place.
We're looking here at Alexander Geniez. He's just had a front wheel flat tire. He was with the 4 front runners, and he's now going to have to try and get back into the group. It shouldn't be a problem, but the peloton, there's a big reaction. All the pacemaking being done by team AG2R, and most of the riders in between have been swept up. But there's still this little group of 3, but as you can see, they're only just ahead now, Paul. Majka, Anacona and Platzer.
Well, I don't think they're going anywhere, because as we've said over the last couple of days, what you see in the last few days of the Tour de France is different teams are trying to defend their positions, and that changes the tactics and it changes the order of teams who will come to the front and be prepared to do the pacemaking, which is why on this occasion we've seen a lot of work now being done by AG2R La Mondiale. And let's not forget that last year this was a team that finished 2nd overall in the Tour. And that group has certainly been reduced quite dramatically. I would expect all of the sprinters now to be looking for the autobus, or the bus at the back end of the race. It's not a physical bus, it's a virtual bus that the riders try to get together in and ride together as the sprinters and the non-climbers and survive on these days. They know they will have worked out last night, they'll have looked at the average speeds and try and figure out what the weather conditions are like, and from the average speed then calculate the percentage of the time delay. It's different for every different kind of stage, from as little as 5% up to 33% for the team time trial. Now just having a quick look here at Majka. He's becoming a little bit difficult to keep hold of there. You'd almost have to put a noose around his neck and hang on to try and keep him in this group. Ruben Platzer in the pink sleeves there of the Lamprey squad. If he looks over his shoulder, he'll see that it's still AG2R doing most of the pacemaking, just that little bit further back, but they've got rid now of Romain Sicard. But there you can see the French AG2R team doing a pretty impressive job. A very, very good climber in his own right. They've put a bit of difficulty onto Ruben Platzer. He's, I think, gasping for breath, but look at this. What a magical backdrop.
Well, this very steady but quite high tempo being created by AG2R now. They've lost one man on Sky because Ian Stannard has gone to the back of the race and has been tailed off the peloton. So the cracks are appearing now, and I'm sure the other riders are taking note of this as we continue in the ascendancy here. We're up over 5,000 feet at the moment. Peter Weening there having a job to hold the back wheel.
Well, the tempo really is now starting to get a little bit vicious. It's starting to bite in there, and one of the early attackers yesterday, Dylan van Baal, the Dutch rider on Cannondale Garmin, slipping away. The experience, number 46, Michael Rogers, he looks around the corner thinking, oh, it's going to be a hard day today, especially if Alberto Contador needs some assistance down towards the end of the race. And bear in mind, Phil, we haven't really yet got into halfway up this climb. There's still an awful lot of climbing to go. We're actually, as we go through the tunneled part here, we're about to reach a slight plateau for a couple of kilometers before it really starts to kick up once more.
There are 3 tunnels actually we climb through as we climb up the mountain today. We've gone back up to the leaders. Genier had the flat front wheel. He's back with the group now. They're pushing on. The gap was 750 at the base. It's down to 533. And we've got Micah, Anacona and Platzer. And this is Platzer putting in an offensive.
Well, this is the rider, and it's so strange when you get these climbs that the difference in gradients suits different riders. And Ruben Platzer was having a spot of bother before, and he all of a sudden has found a new second breath, if you like. But if you just caught a quick glimpse there, AG2R have done a fine job of work, and they've slowly dragged themselves up. And I think those 3 riders very shortly, next time we get a quick look at them, will be back in contact.
If they keep lifting the pace like this, Platzer being the 16th stage winner down in gap of this tour, Sylvain Chavanel is the rider here, 183, and that gap has suddenly opened because of the acceleration of the peloton.
For Martin Elmiger, the rider just in front of him, a former winner of the Santos Tour Down Under in Australia, and Sylvain Chavanel, a rider who during the transfer season will be seriously looking for a new contract, because his contract, along with Jérôme Pinot, the rider who's been with him as his mate on many of his teams for a long time, has announced his retirement. Chavanel still looking for a contract for next season.
12 points.
Prize, Phil, because Stannard has just done so much work on the flat stages of this race, sometimes doing as much as 50 or 60 kilometers of pacemaking on the front. Now we're getting to the point where a lot of these guys are really starting to hurt and pay for the energy that they've dispensed in the early part of this year's race. And for Stannard, well, he's just hoping he can get over the top of this climb and get himself up to the top of the Alpe d'Huez inside of the elimination time, and he's handed responsibility up to the climbers, the lighter built riders on Team Sky, to look after Froome in these last few kilometers. 66 kilometers now left to go.
Bardet is the man that they're doing all this work for at the front. Bardet would love to get some points. They really could do with everybody back, and 5 minutes with the 4 riders, they're catchable before the top of this climb. They really are. Right, Joe, how on earth did they build that bridge?
With great difficulty, I would expect. Now, the French, I have to say, Phil, we've seen some magnificent bridges throughout the whole of this 3-week tour around France, and the viaduct of Millau that we saw earlier on, which is almost higher than the Eiffel Tower, must have been one of the iconic bridges that we've seen so far this year. And that little bridge we saw just a few moments ago, I think it was the viaduct of Sallanches, and if you know Sallanches, that's where a certain Bernard Hinault was crowned champion of the world.
Well, as we are seeing at 5:17, we are hearing reports from the side of Alpe d'Huez that the spectators there, known as Dutch Corner, they've just seen the Sky team vehicles going through, and they've been rather aggressive against the vehicles, trying to get inside the vehicles. Well, as far as we know, they got through safely, but you know, this really...
The scary thing is, Phil, that when you look at soccer, you look at rugby, you look at any other sport, so the athletes are completely protected because they're in stands, they're in tribunes, and here the stadium is the open roads, the open fields. There is no protection between the spectators and the riders, and hopefully most of the spectators do come to the Tour de France with respect for what these guys are going through. Especially look at this guy here, Jean-Christophe Perrault. When you think about the accident they had, when you think about what he's done to stay in the Tour de France, they shouldn't really be insulted and attacked like that.
Yes, and the same applies with the spitting. Doing the spitting has been flashed around on the social media, and none other than Fabian Cancellara, who crashed out of this race while wearing the yellow jersey, said, "Who is this guy?" And I think he wants to know his full name and address. These are the leaders.
I wouldn't be surprised if Fabian Cancellara goes round and has a quick word with him either, because Fabian, I think, rather disgusted by that incident yesterday. There was a couple of incidences against one or two riders which I found rather disgusting myself, I'd have to say. And if you have a quick look around social media, you can see who these people are, maybe circulate it and try and track them down.
5 minutes 11 seconds, 65 kilometers only to go. Remember, short stage today of 110. The sprinters will be afraid if this peloton keeps pushing on that they will be eliminated from the Tour. That has always been in the back of their minds on a short stage. They've got to get in within about, we don't know the actual figure till the leader crosses the line, about 27 minutes, 28 minutes. But until we know the average speed for the day, we don't know the elimination time for the riders. High humidity today. It's still pretty cool at 18 degrees Celsius, but it's a beautiful day for riding the high mountains of the Tour de France on this occasion for the last time. 5 minutes 5 seconds. So those four leaders, and thanks solely to the pacemaking, Jean-Christophe Perrault, the runner-up in the Tour de France and who has been injured here in this race, he's brought that gap down virtually single-handed by over 2 minutes. Look at his face. This guy is just riding for one man now, the polka dot jersey wearer of Romain Bardet. It would be a great result if he could get Bardet home in polka dot tonight.
Juniez has felt the fact that the average speed is dropping down a fraction, and he's taken off on his own.
Well, Warren and Barguil, just the two riders down there low, trying to just hold that peloton, hope they slow a little bit, but it's all due to the incessant pacemaking of Team AG. And this looks to me as though Genier has decided more speed required in this breakaway. He's gone forward by himself. Only 60 kilometers left to go. He knows a lot of riders when you've got 4 minutes lead over the peloton. Genier might have a little bit of an ambition here today.
Well, he's 27 years of age. He's only got one victory to his credit this year, and that was the Trofeo Bro-Léon, which is a race in Brittany. It's a rather steep little race. But, you know, he did finish 9th overall in the Giro d'Italia, so it indicates that he's a man who will not have too much fear of the big high mountains of today.
And it's only his second Tour de France. He wasn't here last year. In 2013, he finished in 44th position. This guy's a pretty solid bike rider.
Well, I'd almost forgotten, Phil. It seems like months ago, but he actually was in the same race. He raced into the town where he was born, and that was way back in Rodez. Seems like a year ago now.
It does, actually, when we saw his name all over this. And he made a big effort to try and finish it off for the folks back home. It didn't work out. But he's no stranger to climbs. At the moment, he's pushed the odds up just about the same speed between the two now.
Well, also, Phil, he won a very difficult stage in the Vuelta Espana back in 2013, and that was to Peyragudes. It's a really nasty little climb in the Pyrenees, and we've used it a couple of times in the Tour de France as well. So they'll probably know that. Barguil, number 82, woof, he can breathe a sigh of relief as he recovers now. And again, there's those nasty little speed bumps that the French seem to have invented over the last 12 months. And nearly every little town that you go through now has those speed bumps to slow down the traffic, but it makes it a bit difficult riding a bike into town. Juniez, been a professional since 2010. He originally turned professional for the Skill Shimano squad and stayed with them for 3 years before moving across to FDJ. Barguil, again, he's just 23 years of age. This kid sitting on the back here, he's a two-time stage winner in the Vuelta Espana too. He's trying to discover the Tour de France this year as just a little bit further forward in front of him. He's got his teammate trying to pace him. That's Simon Geschke. 5 kilometers now to go to the summit. The gap is starting to appear between Juniez and the other riders who are with him. What he'll have to hope now, and as you can see, lots of damage happening at the back end of the main field. One by one, riders starting to pop. Just having a quick look there. Well, that's JC, and no surprise really, Jean-Christophe Perrault has done his job for the day. He's done a lot of pacemaking, and now he's paying for the effort.
At this point, you ride steady and you can't panic. Hope the top comes soon. We top out at just over 56 to go. We're 58.3 at the moment, as Lars Bakker just tries to ride away. It's 3:31, and here comes the attack. This is the first one from Movistar, and they've gone on the climb of the Col de la Coiffeur. They have time to gain time. This is Valverde making his move.
Well, he's not just defending his position in third place at the start of the day. This man is going for the long one. If he wants to do something, if he wants to turn the tables on this race this afternoon, he knows he has to go from a long way out. This is a really courageous move by this man. Very often towards the end of the Tour de France, riders are trying to defend their little position in second or third or seventh overall, but Alejandro Valverde is putting all of his cards on the table right now. And let's not forget, Phil, he's a good descender. If he can go over the top of this climb with a 1 minute advantage, he's got 20 kilometers or 12 miles downhill to recover over the top of this climb.
He starts his attack with a deficit on Chris Froome of 5 minutes and 25 seconds. Now, the word was that it would be the rider in white who would attack Froome today, Quintana, on this climb. Now it's Valverde, his teammate, who has gone. They've got the chance of the old 1-2 here, and they've seen that Chris Froome has been stripped of his team now as they come towards the top of the climb of the Col de la Croix de Fer. Navadauskas in trouble now.
Well, he went on the early move. He wanted to try his hand and getting a slight advantage before the start of the climb, but this is a climb that shows no friends at all. I just spotted Andrew Talansky there on the wheel of Geraint Thomas. Thomas had a very difficult last 48 hours. The guy in the black jersey there, Phil, he was 4th overall at the start of the stage yesterday, and bang, he lost all of his chances. It is Nicholas Roach over to the right-hand side.
It's Roach and Porte have got to allow now. They're going to have to try and do something about this. Roach doesn't look too relaxed, but he's got to try and contain that move by Valverde.
Well, that's what he wants to do. He's had a difficult day himself. It's quite funny how one day they've lost a rider, the next day he's managed to bounce back to help. And Nicholas Roach today is going to have to do something very, very special to defend the position of Chris Froome. 25 seconds, and in modern cycling that is almost impossible.
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's very, very unlikely. And but he's attacked early, and as he attacks at this stage now, Jens Voigt, what do you think of this move by Valverde, and in particular for Movistar?
Well, I believe it's a very, very good move. And to me, the biggest thing about this move is that Valverde is ready to sacrifice everything. Valverde is going to be the king of the day, taking yellow and the stage win, or he's going to maybe lose everything and finish 25th today. And he's ready and willing to put it all on a line for his teammate, for Quintana, to give Quintana the best possible chance of attacking Froome later if this attack doesn't go through. So just on a human point of view, it's a great move by him. It's a really champion move to go, okay, I go all in, I lose it all, or I win it all today.
Well, we're going to find out now, because he's making progress here in his 8th tour.
But I think that's the kind of rider Alejandro Valverde is. He's done so much in the sport, and now he can take that risk. It's a do-or-die effort this afternoon. Team Sky reduced to 2 men, Richie Porte and Nicholas Roach. But again, Phil, they mustn't panic at a time like this. You know, Nick Roach is a solid rider. You have to remember that Nicholas Roach has finished in the top 20 in the Tour de France on a couple of occasions. As we look at this group, tailing off the back, Thibaut Pinot, Andrew Talansky, Matthias Frank. There's some serious men losing contact here. And it looks like the bobbing style of Dan Martin there as well in the lime green for Canadel Garmin. Now, this is a man who we've not talked about very much. This is Jose Serpa, the Colombian rider, who, strangely enough, as a Colombian rider, is not reputedly a great climber, but he's been a great track man on the velodrome in the past.
First time we've mentioned his name in 3 weeks of cycling, but he is a very good climber, and looks like he's decided to flex his muscles today. There's the long barren road now as we come up towards the summit of the Col de la Croix de Fer. Now, the first 2 years that Valverde rode the Tour de France, he wore the white jersey of a best young rider, but didn't finish the Tour. Last year, he finished in 4th place. Currently, he's 3rd. And now we'll see what he can do. But this is the man who is setting fur at the moment. Alexander Genier from Rodez, down in the Ardèche, now coming up not far from the summit.
Well, you might remember me earlier talking about the stage to Périgueux. That, in fact, Genier's won in the Vuelta Espana. But if you go back to 2012 in the Tour de France, the stage up to Périgueux, which is right outside of the town of... I've forgotten the name of the town, down in the valley where... I've lost it now. The thermal town, well. The thermal town near Super-Bagné, where Valverde jumped away and put Bradley Wiggins into difficulty.
Well, Luchon.
That's it. Very good.
The town of Luchon-Bagné. Okay.
Well, that's where he jumped away on that stage, won the stage, and it was the stage that nearly was the undoing of Bradley Wiggins, if you remember.
Well, that's a very small group now. Roche has got to the front. They know that Valverde has gone. They're not panicking at the moment. We haven't got a time check just now on the approach of Valverde, but it looks as though he's got 30 seconds on this group at the moment. And then
keeping a close eye on Chris Froome.
Well, yesterday Valverde cracked and he dropped back to 5 minutes and 25 seconds. At this minute in time, he's not a major concern for Chris Froome, but you know, this could be a little bit of a dummy to try and set up a springboard for the white jersey, his teammate Quintana, to really hit at Chris Froome.
Well, this is the big advantage that Movistar have always said that they had throughout the whole of this Tour de France. They had this two-pronged attack that they could use coming into the mountain stages. Valverde sadly lost a little bit too much time, because if he was at about 3 minutes, there would be a lot more pressure on Team Sky to be forced to chase him down. Quintana's gone.
That is gone. That's the 1-2 we expected.
Well, this is the move, and I did not expect it to come on this climb, but Nairo Quintana knew that if he wants to win the Tour de France, he needed big time. He needs 2 minutes and 38 seconds on Chris Froome, and he has gone a long way from the finish. And the advantage he's got is ahead of him on the road. He has got Alejandro Valverde. Now, if he joins forces, and I'm sure he'll ride across the gap very quickly to Alejandro Valverde, and once he joins Valverde, they've got two Movistar riders together, and they will collaborate. And the advantage is that on the descent, Valverde will make a really fast descent for Nairo Quintana, drag him along the valley road, and take him to the next part. Now, this is interesting because here's a Colombian rider, Jose Serpa, who all of a sudden I think is remembering that he's a compatriot of Nairo Quintana. Quintana not showing any emotion. Bang, there's another Sky rider who's just popped away there, and that looks like Richie Porte. The gears are not going round as smoothly as he would have liked to. So the attacks are coming now, slipping away there. Number 34 is Wout Poels. Again, it's in fact Richie Porte is not the rider who went away, it was Wout Poels, and Richie Porte has found something this afternoon. He knows he's going to have to really dig in deep, even though he's leaving Team Sky at the end of this year to go somewhere else. We believe it to be at BMC, but it's not been officially announced. He is still a very good friend of Chris Froome's. They're good mates, definitely. Geraint Thomas, he just can't get the engine room firing now. He looks across at Dan Martin. He's going backwards, 4th overall at the start of the day yesterday. It is going to be a dramatic stage. The next rider to disappear is Nicolas Roche. That means there's not many men left to look after Chris Froome.
Well, we're watching now. This was a planned attack by Valverde to be followed by Quintana, and so far Movistar is saying it's gone perfectly according to plan.
Well, Nicolas Roche has now popped off the back of that group. There's only one man left from Sky. It's the man who's been on and off many times. Now the join here, this is the tactical move. It's perfection if they can make it work. Now I think it's a good move at Quintana because he's joined Valverde. Valverde, if they stay together over the top of this climb, will eat his heart out, ride his heart out on the descent, because it's still a long way to go to the Alpe d'Huez.
It's also a long way to go to Bourg d'Oisans downhill, and it is actually Valverde who is the champion descender. He's gone up here to try and guide the young man in white down the mountain, not necessarily up the mountain, and this is an in-battle, and now it's up to Chris Froome to counter it. He's still got time on his side, remember, but if Quintana had not made a move here, he had no chance of winning the Tour de France.
If he wants to win win the Tour de France, Phil. He knows he's got to make big time. He probably looked back at the results from the last time they came to Alpe d'Huez, and he was up against Chris Froome. He put 1 minute and 6 seconds into Chris Froome on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez. He needs in excess of 2.5 minutes to win the Tour de France this year, which is why he had to attack from so far out. But the fact that he's got his own teammate with him, Alejandro Valverde, that's trump cards on the table for the moment.
Well, this has put Romain Bardet's ambitions on ice.
The next little town, Alemont, and then it's a longer road up towards Bourg d'Oisans. It's a straight road as well. It's unterminable for this young man because it's slightly uphill once he gets onto the main road, climbing into the base station of Alpe d'Huez, Bourg d'Oisans, and then he'll see the sign 13.5 kilometers to the summit.
It's a great move by Genier, and so far he's not looked to have made any mistakes. He is going to go to the bottom of the Alpe, possibly with 4.5 minutes, and that's a good lead for the last 16 kilometers to the top of the climb. And what a result it would be for him. He's certainly doing his French reputation the world of good today on what is seen as one of the hardest days in the Tour de France because of the speed and the shortness of the day.
Well, the dam wall of the Lac de Vernay just hovers above the small town of Alemont. These riders swinging away. This chase group now looking at 25 kilometers to go as well. So, having a quick look at this group, Pinot is in this group, Anacona, Roland, Plaza, Jose Serpa, the Colombian rider on Team Lampre, Heyerdahl and Navadauskas. What a magnificent shot that is as they move away this gravity dam wall as they drop down into Alemont. The gap is 1 minute and 42 seconds between Geniez, 3 minutes back to the chasers, and then 4:05 it is saying back to the yellow jersey group, which has got now, after the recovery, most of the riders in the top positions in the overall standings. Although Nibali
.5 kilometers in the distance is the town, and the far distance, the town of Bourg d'Oisans. We'll turn left, we'll head up Alpe d'Huez. It's a fable climb, Paul. Over the years, it's been climbed now 29 times when we get on it today. And it's a fable climb. It's where the Colombians came of age. I remember back in 1984, Lucho Herrera. Boy, he went home a hero, didn't he?
Well, Phil, you remember, I was in the race. I remember Lucho Herrera was in the breakaway. It was the first year they were amateur riders, the first time they'd allowed amateur riders into the Tour de France. And Lucho Herrera was racing up against Bernard Hinault.
Yeah.
He was racing up against Laurent Fignon. And he went to the top of the Alpe d'Huez. And strangely enough, that night, I stayed in the hotel with Lucho Herrera as he crossed the line, and it was crazy pandemonium. There were trumpets and horns, everything going all night. I got no sleep.
Neither did I. 49 seconds he beat Laurent Fignon, who went on to win the Tour de France, by the way. Interesting too, Fignon beat Bernard Hinault that year by over 10 minutes.
First Colombian winner of a stage in the Tour de France, and if my memory serves me correctly, Phil, there were 3 Colombian riders in the top 10, and Bernard Hinault was not happy to get beaten by what he regarded as a bunch of amateurs. But I'll tell you one thing, Phil, they were amazing the way they went uphill. I was there and I had first-hand experience.
Great climbers, born and bred climbers. But this is the man today who's setting the televisions alive around France, at least. Alexander Genier trying to take advantage of the in-battle for the final podium in Paris tomorrow by stealing the stage up Alpe d'Huez.
2 men caught in no man's land. Nicolas Ede in the front in the red jersey from Cofidis, and with him Lars Bak of Team Lotto Soudal. Oh, calm down, calm. Just take it easy. We've still got a long way to go. Yes, they have, and they know what's on the horizon. In fact, we're getting the time check that there is a big gap, but I think the reason that Lars Bak was saying just slow down a bit was because he realizes that they're about to get caught by this group of chasers. Well, there they are. There's the yellow car just behind them. And that's why Lars Bak said, just hold on, let's not use all of our energy along the mountain road, because otherwise we'll blow to pieces on the
strong riders from Garmin, from Cannondale Garmin in here, so they got a fair chance of making it, right? Heyerdahl is a brilliant climber, so I guess maybe I put some money on him for today.
Well, that's an interesting one, and he's the rider here, the tallest of the two, and Well, we'll see when they make the move here. That was Jose Serpas just swung off the front. They've also got the two top French climbers, Thibaut Pinot in here and Pierre Rolland. They're now under the sprint banner. Nobody interested in the green jersey sprint, but they want to get to the mountain.
Well, that's Serpa there, Phil, in second position. I remember him winning the Tour de Langkawi, a brilliant race in Malaysia, but I wonder if we always used to compare the Genting Highlands finish to the Alpe d'Huez. It was the Malaysian Alpe d'Huez, if you like, and he's lining himself up now for the real Alpe d'Huez.
That was a very, very hard climb and very steep towards the end, and Serpa is a good climber. Well, the riders, we're now seeing the Chris Froome group. It's strengthened to around 30-35 riders here. They're on the outskirts of Bourg d'Oisans, and once we get through Bourg, they will make a left turn and they're onto the climb. And we're not far away from starting that climb now with the leader, Alexander Genier.
Just chatting alongside him there, Yvon Madio, the younger brother of Marc Madio, himself a very good professional.
Here we are. We're starting the climb now, 13.8 kilometres to the summit. It starts immediately with its lacets, its corners, as it hairpins its way to the summit. On every corner, it tells you the altitude they reach, and each corner named after a famous rider from the Tour de France.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Phil, I can still remember as you make that turn onto the Alpe d'Huez, it looks like a wall straight in front of you. It's dark tarmac, and then you know you're in for 38 to 42 minutes of pain if you're going to be one of the top riders. Some of the guys at the back, it'll take them 50 to 55 minutes to get up this beast.
So here now we can see rider Movistar starting to do some tempo in the peloton. So that's an indication to me that they still having a plan with Quintana, and they not only want to try to take the yellow jersey, but they want to win the stage as well with Quintana today. That's why they're trying to reduce the time gap to the leading riders.
Well, Phil, just looking at the yellow jersey group come through here, that means now that all the points in the Skoda sprint competition have gone away for today. There's only 70 points left on tomorrow's stage. So as long as Peter Sagan gets himself onto the Champs-Élysées, he's won that competition for the fourth year in a row.
We won't be seeing too much of Peter today. We perhaps will tomorrow when the sprinters should cross swords on that last stage in Paris. This, though, will decide the Tour de France today. The time gains at the top of this mountain, just 9 miles away, will be the time gains and losses tomorrow in Paris.
Well, his gap over this chasing group now is down to 1 minute and 35 seconds. Navadauskas on the left, 168. He said, right, it's up to you now, rider. You defend the flag for Canada and, of course, for the United States with Cannondale Garmin. That was Navadauskas going back, his job done for the day. And, you know, when you stop working on a slope like this, it's almost as if you stop. And also, you can see Lars back, number 72. He's going through the same thing.
15 kilometres banner for the peloton of Chris Froome. He knows he's going to be hit any second once we turn onto the climb itself. There's the result of the sprint for what it's worth. It was a non-sprint. Genier Navadauskas with the order over the line. None of these riders interested in the green jersey competition. Now, Team Sky are going to guide Chris Froome onto the slopes of Alpe d'Huez, and then I suspect it's all down to Froome.
Well, he's going to have to take the bull by the horns and really ride for himself. For once he loses his teammates, and they will stay with him, Phil, for as long as possible. But once he loses his teammates, the responsibility is his own as the yellow jersey. Good to see Lamprey doing this pacemaking. Rider Heyerdahl is the rider in second position in that lime green jersey of Cannondale Garmin. While this is the yellow jersey group, and it has swelled quite a bit in numbers, but you watch out when they hit that first slope, when it kicks up to 10.5% of the first kilometre, you'll see all of these guys gasping for breath, and one or two of them might be putting out the parachutes.
Serpa on the front of this second group on the road. Heyerdahl, the Canadian rider, the only Canadian to win the Tour of Italy, and always gets better on the last week of a 3-week race. He's sat there in second place. Pierre Rolland, Thibaut Pinot, their climbers, winner Annacona. He's just about hanging on now as Serpa starts to wind it up. There's been a bike change. Nibali has a flat tyre, and this is as he approached. Couldn't be a worse possible time for last year's winner.
See how how calm he was then, though, Phil. You've got to be serious at a moment like this. He took the bottles off his machine and changed them across to the new machine because he realizes it's important to keep topped up with fluids. Cast your mind back at the last time this racer came up to the Alpe d'Huez. Chris Froome went through a very difficult period. He had a hunger flat. He was running out of energy, and he had to get an energy bar from the team car, which was picked up by Richie Porte, and now it's a move by Movistar.
Well, and Chris Froome didn't attack when he saw this man in trouble, if indeed he knew. But he's going to get back, I think, but he's going to have to sprint it close because the move has started now. This is the pressure going on. It's winner Anacona who started tapping on the pedals. He's pushed Sky out of the way. Chris Froome is only interested in the riders immediately behind him. And those are the two riders he'll watch everywhere.
Slipping back there was the big man, Roman Kreuziger. That's Alberto Contador bobbing out of the saddle. But this is always a very difficult moment to have a mechanical problem at the start of a climb. And try and ride your way.
That, Paul.
Trying to ride your way back through the convoy of cars is very difficult. Up alongside of Vincenzo Nibali, he's got one teammate there, Tanel Kangat. What a strong boy he has been from Estonia.
The Union flag of the United Kingdom flies as the riders go past it there for Chris Froome now. He's going to have to find something special. He only needs to watch two riders now to win the Tour de France, Valverde and Quintana. I don't think it's possible now for Valverde to recover 5 minutes, but what about Quintana's 2 minutes and 30-odd seconds?
Well, to put it into perspective, the man just slipping backwards there on the wheel of Vincenzo Nibali, 129, Thomas Vauclair. His team manager was saying on French radio last night that Thomas was in such a bad state yesterday, he even contemplated abandoning the Tour de France. And this is a guy who's ridden the Tour de France many, many times, and that just reflects how tough this last few days in the Alps have been.
Vauclair is not a quitter, that's for sure. Well, nobody going yet. The white jersey is expected to jump, but he hasn't moved yet. And this is the winner from last year, Vincenzo Nibali. As we're looking at Nibali, I think there he is. He started to go, and he's gone a long way from the summit. A reaction from Porte. Froome is after Porte.
Let's not forget, there's another problem. Matthias Frank has had a flat tyre, a back flat tyre being changed there by the mechanic, throws it in as quickly as possible. This guy is in 7th place overall, but it's all about Nairo Quintana. Richie Porte has gone across, but Froome could not follow him. The thing about Froome is he doesn't have that acceleration, but he slowly drags himself back into the race.
Once he gets his revs up to about 120, he comes across. But now, this is the move. Quintana has said he will attack him all the way to the finish. If at worst there's a consolation prize, it will be a stage win. But hey, he wants to win the Tour de France even now.
Well, he will fight all the way to the top of this climber. The man trying to defend his 4th place overall of Vincenzo Nibali at the moment. He may well be slipping down. And let's not forget, Alberto Contador lost a huge chunk of time yesterday.
Well, we've seen some incredible climbs on here, but normally by the top it's been one at most 2 riders. At the moment we have a huge group going shoulder to shoulder here. Don't forget we still have a leader up front, but the camera's rightly staying with the battle. And
let's not forget that the rider on the right-hand side there in the green jersey, Pierre Rolland, was the winner at the top of Alpe d'Huez back in 2011. Calm returns to the storm as Richie Porte sets the tempo on the front for his mate. Hejjedal.
He's gone from the second group on the road now. He's off in pursuit of Alexander Genier. And this is a good move by rider Hejjedal. It really is. The Canadian is going to give it his best shot here. There is a slight reaction from the field. It looks like it is Anacona there.
Well, from Vancouver Island, Phil, I would think they're shouting quite a lot for this man from Victoria. He is a strong rider, winner of the Giro d'Italia. Navadauskas, job done. He's slipping back down through the main field. He just wants to survive. And it goes again, Quintana.
So, another move by him now. Any reaction again? They're trying to go for him, but this is a pure climber in action now. You can accelerate, recover, accelerate. How many hits can they take?
Well, talk about, as we did a little bit earlier on, Lucho Herrera, the magical climber out of Colombia. The first time that we realized how brilliant Colombian climbers could be. Well, Nairo Quintana goes right into exactly the same mold.
And this is a superb acceleration here. Now, it's hurting the Sky team, but Wout Poels is trying trying to contain him.
Well, he is, but he needs to sit up as he looks over his shoulder. They've got the gap once more over Chris Froome, and locked onto the wheel of Chris Froome was Alejandro Valverde. Now you can see Villemos, winner of the stage to the Mur de Bretagne, is trying to nurse along his young teammate there, Romain Bardet.
Valverde sits on the wheel of Chris Froome. He is third in all. He's watched his young teammate put the attack in this time on the Col de Croix de Fer. It was the other way around. Wout Poels is trying to contain the move, and a little kick by Richie Porte is bringing Chris Froome back up to his side. This hill is so hard, and the camera really doesn't really show just how hard it is.
Unless you've actually ridden up this climb on a bike, you don't realise how horrendous it is. It never gives up. It is relentless. And once you even get to the little town partway up, the town of Oison, it still goes up. And what really smacks you in the face, Phil, is if you look up, you can see the chalets above and say, oh my goodness me, do I have to go up there?
He's back, and despite all of this movement, Nibali is also progressing, and he had the bad luck to puncture. Now, Wout Poels, he's turned out to be an incredible teammate here these last few days.
Froome is slowing off while his teammates are actually riding a little bit of a way up the road, and that's trying to set up the move for Alejandro Valverde. Let's not forget, there is also a battle for the stage victory. Hagedal goes again, and he's only looking for 44 seconds. Pinot will follow him, the rider in the red, white and blue, but he won't try and collaborate because it's his teammate Juniez who leads the race currently.
Winner Anacona, the other rider there, but he drops away. This is the rider up front, getting the applause first. And he'll now know from the team car that his teammate is coming up as well, as rider Hagedal tries to make this a great day for Canada and for Cannondale Garmin. 35 seconds, it's all he is behind. We're still a long way to climb. This hill never gets easier.
Strong boy, a little chat going on, touching his ear there, trying to hear the instructions being relayed up from the team car as Wout Poels, followed by Richie Porte and Chris Froome, but they're still hovering in his wheel, waiting to make the next move.
11 kilometres to go, one leader, and so far Chris Froome is handling the attacks. Now looking at this group here, Andrew Talansky and passing through there, hopefully number one trying to get up there. So unlucky, couldn't have been a worse time to puncture for Vincenzo Nibali. At the time I felt he was hoping to have gained time on Valverde. Instead, he just wants to get back into the action here.
Wout Poels and Richie Porte in first and second place there. They will ride to try and deaden any further attacks, but the problem with a guy like number 51 Nairo Quintana, Phil, is once the gradient starts to get steeper, he feels at home, he feels the ability to push, and he will go once again. We've got a couple of kilometres where it does get slightly easier. It's only 8% the gradient at this point, Phil, and once we get back to the 9.5%, watch out for the rider in the white jersey there going again.